Hey there. Are you tired of waiting for the next episode of It's Probably Not Aliens? Well, we've got some good news for you. On Nebula, our streaming service, you can get access to all our episodes a week early. That's right, you'll never have to wait again to hear Scott and I debunk the latest ancient astronaut theory or get a movie fact wrong. But that's not all. Nebula is home to dozens of content creators we know you like, so you can find all your favorites in one place. Plus, we post content on there that you won't find anywhere else. And the best part? By signing up for Nebula at nebula.tv/probablyNotAliens, you're directly supporting the show and both of us. So don't wait any longer. Join Nebula today and listen to the next episode right after this one.
All right, Archimedes.
So yeah,
I've got this is going to be like a cool technological, like engineering sort of one, I imagine.
A little bit, yeah.
So there's a sound clip from this episode of Ancient Aliens that I forgot to play in our episode about chariots of fire. So I would like to play it for you now, because I feel like this is sort of the mad scientist mindset we got to get in for this episode with Archimedes. Okay?
Okay.
This is generally considered to be the first working steam engine. It worked more like a turbine than a classic steam engine with pistons. But it's very significant because it really is taking, a compressed gas, and turning it into energy. Wow! That has a lot of energy. Steam.
Steam.
So this is from the episode of Ancient Aliens. He's got this like model steam engine sort of thing, and it like literally explodes in front of him. And this mad scientist man has this energy, and it just ends his segment with him just pointing up and being like, "Steam."
Steam. Yeah, that is actually, yeah, I know what they're referring to, and it's a pretty cool thing where there's like this ancient Greek thing that's like a metal ball with water in it, and if you heat it up, then it starts spewing steam out of both sides, and it rotates, and everyone's like, man, if the Greeks just if they just took this like one step further, they would have like had the Industrial Revolution in like the friggin' 2000 plus years ago, and I for one want
and we would have destroyed the planet faster, we would have speed run destroying the planet.
Okay, you went immediately in the dark direction. Tristan is currently writing down Steampunk Ancient Greece.
Okay, that's a cooler direction, yeah. That's going to be a new D&D setting.
You know me too well. Because that is far too cool of a concept of like, what if like Athens and Sparta and like all these like, like Greek stuff with like Greek gods and all that stuff, but also steampunk?
Steampunk Percy Jackson? Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm like thinking like, what if like the Iliad, or like, what if like the Odyssey, but Odysseus had a gun? And then it all comes back to Hades.
Give Odysseus a gun.
It all comes back to the game Hades.
It's all Hades again. Give them guns.
That's the Hades 2 where where all the weapons are guns that we talked about in the last episode.
Yep.
But like, yeah, like, can you imagine like steampunk Odysseus? Oh man,
that'd be pretty good.
I gotta talk to Aiden
That'd
about
be
this.
incredible.
Important things.
What happened to steampunk stuff? That steampunk was like 10 years ago. It was like the biggest craze in like the whole world. It felt like everyone was like, this is a cool aesthetic. Nerds were into it. Artists were into it. I felt like filmmakers were into it. Everyone was into it. And I feel like now it became niche again. Or if it even still, I'm sure it exists still, but it used to be so big.
Yeah, nothing really. I can't think of like any big properties that tried to like take the steampunk aesthetic really worked out. The closest I can think of is, and even then it's like not, I was thinking more the show Arcane kind of does a steampunk aesthetic. But
Okay.
then they reveal that it's not steam, it's like magic or something. I don't know. Don't at me. I've never played League of Legends, so I don't know the lore of Arcane very well.
I wonder now if it was Wild Wild West that really sort of killed the steampunk aesthetic, the movie of it with Will Smith and them. Because I feel like that leaned into it so hard and it was just not good. And I feel like that was probably the biggest it got. And then it flopped.
Potentially. I'd be curious to figure out. Because, yeah, steampunk looks cool and has like a lot of cool aspects to it.
Cool.
But it's just, yeah, like I feel like just the fact that I can't think of like a single iconic like movie franchise that really leans into it. To the point where now I feel like diesel punk is having a bigger moment than steampunk.
What's diesel punk? Is that like cars and whatnot?
Yeah, it's like World War I, World War II type stuff.
Gotcha.
Like I'm trying to think of like some really like there's like, you know, the board game Scythe, which takes place in like a fictional version of Russia where they have mechs, but it's like World War I era technology, or it's like like 1920s. Or like
okay.
Like there's a book called the book it's not sticking up, but like the Trench Crusade thing I was talking about with like the sort of World War I, but demons and angels. And
oh, that's cool.
I think that there's like I think we're having like a cultural moment where we're all kind of aesthetically interested in World War I.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah.
Kaiserreich, I guess, the popular Hearts of Iron mod.
Yeah, it does feel like that, doesn't it? I don't know. It's weird. It's interesting. There's all these different I was trying to look up if anyone has a definitive answer to what happened to steampunk, and all I got are Medium articles that are paywalled that I don't want to go into. Or if they're not paywalled, I have to log in, and that's too much work for me. I don't want to do that.
Maybe that's what happened, is that they made you have to log in to make steampunk stuff.
They made you have to log in to participate in steampunk culture, which is the opposite of punk culture, man. Don't make me log in. All right? I'm logging out. I'm disconnecting.
Maybe it's just the fact that like since it was like it was a thing that was so built around like cosplay as like a major thing. Yeah. And cosplay has become so professionalized, and also so like COVID took a major hit to it. And then also on top of that, now like a lot of like high-end cosplayers are doing so professionally, in which case they need to play like their costumes need to be like video game or TV or movie characters in order to like, you know. Yeah.
Oh, BioShock is sort of the first one, right? Was sort of a steampunky aesthetic, kind of. Yeah. With the big guys with the drills. I never played BioShock.
There's also Atom Punk, which is sort of the 1950s aesthetic, which is sort of like what Fallout does.
Now that's a fun one. I like that one.
And it could just be that the youngins don't like it. Either way, this is a podcast about aliens, I think.
Sorry, hey, we got way too deep into steampunk stuff. If you know what happened to steampunk, let me know. I don't know what happened. I can't log into Medium. I can't be bothered. This is a podcast about ancient aliens. That's where the clip I played came from earlier. A mad scientist steampunk man. It was great and I love it. My name is Scott Nicewander. I know nothing. I come into this, I watch Ancient Aliens and I believe everything they tell me. And I take little sound bites of them telling me all these cool things. And that's my job.
And I'm Tristan Johnson, who logs into every medium so that I can get all of the information and bring it to you. I've traveled to the other side for Medium and I bring it back.
So can you tell me what happened to steampunk? I can't stress this enough. I do not want to log in right now.
Well,
it says the subheading says how the iPhone popularized steampunk ... and how the iPhone killed it off. So we've got a little good guy, bad guy iPhone over here.
Ooh.
I know how much you like the iPhone to be the bad guy.
Well, I'm just, my guess is that it's popular. It's just not peak popular because it had a moment where it was popular and then it died down.
Why do you have to guess? You're logged into all the mediums. I don't know why you're guessing.
It's true.
Tell me, Tristan.
That's what happened. It was popular with millennials, and the Zoomers think it's cringe.
Yep. That's probably it. That's honestly probably it.
But today, the reason why we're talking about steampunk has to do with the fact that we're doing this whole thing on technology. But today, we're dealing with like some like borderline steampunk stuff. I would say this would be very good fodder for my steampunk ancient Greece setting. But today is about Archimedes.
Woo.
A person I only, for some reason in my head, think of as a robotic owl. I think that's a Watchmen reference.
Okay, cool.
I don't know for sure. I think that there is some form of media where there is a robotic owl by the name of Archimedes. Archimedes, I think, is the name of what's his name?
Archimedes. I actually just watched this movie like 2 years ago. I just watched it multiple years ago. Archimedes is the name of the owl in Disney's feature film The Sword in the Stone.
Oh yeah, I did watch that as a kid, and that's one of those Disney movies that not a lot of people have seen, but okay.
So you got there. You just you knew Archimedes was an owl.
Yeah.
You just got the references mixed up, but you got there.
The thing is that I feel like Archimedes is a name that everyone has heard but hasn't heard a ton about. The two things that come to mind for me is owl and Eureka. The inventing of the term Eureka.
Yeah.
So I want to tell you a little bit about Archimedes, and specifically today about whether or not he got help from aliens to build a death ray.
Oh, okay. Okay, tell me about this. What do millions of people around the world believe?
According to this, so Archimedes was a brilliant mathematician who lived in Syracuse during the Punic Wars, the Second Punic War specifically, which were a series of wars between Rome and Carthage, in which Carthage was like an empire that existed sort of on the northern coast of Africa, where them and the Romans were fighting out over who would have dominance over basically the Western Mediterranean. And Syracuse was an island. I mean, I think it still is an island. It hasn't stopped being an island.
Yeah. It's like the Mitch Hedberg. I used to do drugs. I still do drugs, but I also used to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is kind of on an island. It's basically located in Sicily, but like on the southeast corner of Sicily.
Gotcha.
So basically, Second Punic War happens. You can imagine that if like Tunisia and Italy are at war with each other, that Sicily is going to be a big player in that.
Yeah.
In your internal map of the Mediterranean. So that
we all have.
That we all have. I always forget that maps are not everyone's thing. So Syracuse, this was like a city-state that had roots in Greece, so it was Greek-speaking. And they were allies of Rome, but after the death of the Syracusan leader Hiero II in 215 BC, they switched their allegiance to Carthage. So Archimedes grew up in Syracuse. He was a renowned mathematician and a brilliant inventor who then found himself in the middle of a defense of Syracuse because the Romans basically blockaded Syracuse and were sieging Syracuse.
Okay. So this is the story of our hero.
Yeah.
Of this episode.
Mm-hmm. So Archimedes then invents a bunch of doomsday devices to try and defend the city of Syracuse against this Roman blockade. And some of the more famous ones are like the Claw of Archimedes, but the one that we're talking about today is a reported death ray. So
a death ray.
Yeah. So according to legend, Archimedes got all of the mirrors in town and used all of them to focus sunlight and set Roman ships on fire, which was basically designed to like there's ways that we do this today where we can use mirrors to cook food and stuff like that, or burning ants, I think is a famous one.
It's more of a magnifying glass, I feel, but yeah, similar sort of. You use the power of the sun to focus it and you start burning things.
Yeah, exactly. So Archimedes used this death ray, reportedly, to create this intense beam of heat that would set the wooden Roman ships on fire. But despite this, the Romans still took over the city of Syracuse, led by Marcus Claudius Marcellus, who breached the city walls and captured Syracuse. And apparently that is when Archimedes was then killed by a Roman soldier. Oh,
dang. R.I.P.
Yeah, so the questions that come up are, could ancient Greece really have developed such an advanced technology like a death ray?
Yeah.
And how did Archimedes harness the power with such a precise and destructive ability to be able to burn these ships?
How could he have done it? What's the answer?
So, according to millions of people around the world, this death ray is evidence that he had advanced technology because I guess aliens hated Romans or something.
They found this guy, Archimedes. He said a funny word when he got into a bath, and they were like, this guy's our hero now. And we're going to give him all of our cool technology.
Exactly. Like, you want a death ray? Here you go. So that's
death ray? You get a death ray.
So that's what we're looking at today. We're looking at the claim that this death ray was, first of all, real, and second, that it was advanced alien technology.
Okay. Now I'm excited about this one, and I feel like we're going to talk about it, but if you've heard of this story before and you're approximately my age, you may have seen this story sans aliens, but the Archimedes death ray. You may have seen this pop up on a very popular show called Mythbusters several times.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, give me the basic rundowns of the sort of facts of this claim.
Sure. So according to Ancient Aliens, the idea is that this death ray was described as a laser beam thunderbolt death ray and was inspired by Zeus, the Greek god of thunder, who, as we've established in previous episodes, according to Ancient Aliens, is an alien himself that was using death ray instead of thunderbolts.
All the myths are really aliens. That's all you gotta know.
Yeah. And so they draw these comparisons between this like death ray, but also sci-fi depictions of like, you know, the heat ray from War of the Worlds or like phasers or whatever. And so they're like, this is definitely another example of like a directed energy weapon that we saw in movies and TV shows. So that's how you know it's real.
Exactly. And
so they were like, yeah, how could somebody conceive of such a technologically advanced weapon? How is it possible that Archimedes could have access to knowledge that was not available to, or that beyond what was available to other ancient civilizations? How could this have all happened?
How could it have happened? How could someone possibly think to take the big, bright, fiery ball in the sky and channel that into something that we can use on Earth? How could anyone possibly conceive of that?
Yeah. And the answer might surprise you, but first, product? Service?
Yeah, sure. As long as that product is hot.
Yeah.
And steamy? Steampunky?
Buy this death ray.
I don't know. Buy a death ray.
A death ray seems like a thing you would buy out of like the last page of a comic book.
Oh, for sure. Buy this death ray.
Have you ever done a video on those things? On those like the weird shit that's sold at the back of old comic books?
You know what's challenging is that a lot of that stuff doesn't it's hard to find that stuff because when you look at old comic books like through modern day like comic book readers like Marvel stuff or DC stuff, they cut out all the advertisements. So it's hard you have to like actually go out and find old comic books manually and find that stuff. But I would love to. I bet there's a death ray one in there. And it has like the coolest picture of like a kid with a death ray shooting it at like a bully or something like that. And then you get it in the mail and it's just like a little gun with that you have to plug back in the day, you'd have to plug it straight into the wall. It didn't really have it wasn't battery operated. Mm-hmm. And then it would just have a one little light, no sound effects, just one little light bulb on it. But it would be cool.
Well, on this, here's the thing about that death ray, but also the Archimedes death ray, and that is that the heat ray that we talked about here probably wasn't alien tech, primarily because the Archimedes death ray itself probably never existed. So
what? But they did it on the Mythbusters.
So here's the thing. So when you want to find out if something is real, one of the best things that you can do as a historian is like, sometimes if you can find direct evidence, like you want to find evidence as close to the source as possible, right? You want to have something that's like either physical evidence of the thing itself or something written by the person who did it or something like from the same time period. Now, there were several historians that existed at this period who wrote about Archimedes and stuff about his life. People with names like Polybius, Livy, Plutarch, and none of them ever made mention of the death ray. So the first time we ever hear about death ray is in other histories written by people like Lucian and Anthemius of Tralles, which happened, like, again, hundreds of years after Archimedes' death. And when you start seeing the first accounts of something showing up centuries after the death of the person, there's a chance that there's a whole line of evidence. Yeah, there's a chance sometimes that there's a whole line of evidence that just hasn't survived, because when you're doing history, you're kind of trying to do your best with what survives. But
that's true.
It's a big red flag for historians if you have nothing written about it at the time that he existed, and then all of a sudden it shows up hundreds of years later.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot I have a clip of them talking about Archimedes on this show. I want to see what they have to say, maybe, before we continue debunking stuff.
Probably the most famous ancient death ray was the one that was built by the Greek inventor Archimedes. He was able to create this giant mirror and parabolic disc and focus the sun's rays on the fleet and set these ships on fire.
That's Dave Childress. I love when he talks to me about things.
Oh man, just a unique connection to words in general. But the other thing too is that we've done multiple experiments to see if this was even a possible thing that he could do. Because that is one way that we could boost support for such a project, is like, if we, with contemporary access to tools and technology, are able to successfully recreate it, that gives it a lot more credence. So, and this has been tested multiple times, because we know the principle for how it works. We are able to concentrate light in so many things like that. We'll talk about a little bit later, but it's actually a key behind some like really interesting technologies. But like, so like that they've tried several times. Like, for example, in 1973,
we've tried to build this.
Yeah. In 1973, a Greek scientist by the name of Ioannis Sakis tried to test this concept using 70 mirrors, and successfully was able to ignite a plywood of a mock-up of a Roman ship. Now, the problem is that this happened at like a sort of smaller scale, and it was done under controlled conditions, which means that absolutely perfect conditions for everything. He was able to get, and this was like him being able to precisely align all of the mirrors and under ideal conditions. And like everything was like not almost conditions that you couldn't do in real life.
Yeah, I feel like we will. You're gonna talk more about these tests, but I feel like the hardest part, the thing to keep in mind about this, is when you're focusing the sun on a very narrow, specific point, trying to hit a target. That's one thing, but when you remember that they're trying to hit ships that are moving in all kinds of directions, they're moving forward, they're moving in, left and right, and the up and down with the waves, it just makes the precise alignment trying to hit it like almost impossible.
And keep in mind that to do it, you'd have to have like all of these mirrors very precisely positioned so that they are reflecting the sun at the exact same spot. And keep in mind, the sun also moving.
Sun's also moving. That is true.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, technically the Earth is moving, and we view it as the sun. And
the sun is also, everything's moving.
The sun is also moving. Yes, that's true.
Relativity and such. So that shows some promise. Now, in 2005, MIT, a group of MIT students used 127 mirrors to do something similar, and they did get some charring after about 10 minutes under ideal conditions, which showed that it might have been possible, but that it wasn't an exactly practical method to use for combat. And then, as you mentioned, there was multiple attempts on Mythbusters to try and recreate the Death Ray. And each time they tried to do it, they tried different positions and different configurations. They tried
different materials too.
Yeah.
Like I remember they tried to use like modern mirrors as well. They tried to use like bronze, like polished bronze or something like that. They tried all sorts of things. Yeah.
Yeah. And even in the best of conditions, the most thing that they could get was some charring, but they couldn't get any significant ignition at all. Especially when you deal with like real world conditions where like the ships are far enough away that you're dealing with like the distance and the energy loss over distance like that. So Mythbusters concluded that it is a busted myth due to the fact that it's just impractical to even get the necessary conditions seem like they are possible, but as far as practical and useful to actually defeat ships and create a siege or fight a siege, it just seems like it would just lose its ability to do things.
For sure. So all of these tests, all of these experiments, you started saying, if we can recreate it with our modern technology, that would at least lend some credence to that idea. But you're saying we can't do it. Mm-hmm. So, in other words,
we're struggling.
Yeah.
We're struggling. That one is in context because he was talking about we're struggling to do it with our modern technology.
Yeah. So the other part that this runs into issues with is what's called the first law of thermodynamics, or the formulation of the law of conservation of energy.
Okay. Sounds pretty important.
Yeah. So the idea of this, the scientific idea behind it, obviously, is to use mirrors to concentrate sunlight on a very specific part. Curved mirrors can focus light to a small spot that increase the intensity of light at that point. But the problem is that the efficiency of this process is limited because you can't heat an object hotter than the source of the heat, which in this case is the sun.
Well, sun's pretty hot, though.
Yeah, but the whole idea is that you can't really set the ships on fire without the mirrors being a temperature that is hotter than the...
Oh, I see. That makes sense.
The issue of heat comes out also to the mirrors.
Okay. That's... All right. You got me there.
The other thing that makes it impractical is that in order to do this properly, you have to have extremely good alignment, because the efficiency of solar concentrators goes down extremely fast if you do not have precise alignment, which includes making sure that you are pointing it at a place where it reflects direct sunlight and also points in the direction of the people that you go, which means that in order to do it properly, you need like sophisticated equipment and meticulous calibration to make sure that it will work. Because if it isn't extremely precisely on, it'll fall apart very quickly. The efficiency of it will go down and you won't get your thing. So you can imagine that in a laboratory, people are struggling to do it. Imagine trying to get like 100 guys to like hold mirrors in just the right way to have this thing happen.
Yeah, everyone hold completely still, please.
Yeah.
Stop breathing, James. Stop it.
Yeah. The other thing too...
Well, it was ancient Greece though, so it would be Jammies, not James.
It's just Demetrius, all Demetrius.
Yeah, it's fair.
So the other thing too is that the mirrors have to align them this way, you'd have to have very precise mounting systems that could withstand things like thermal expansion. Like they'd have to have like stands that when they're really hot wouldn't warp out.
Things expand when they're hot usually.
Yeah. Plus like wind would have to not be able to rattle the mirrors or move them or anything like that. And
stop breathing, jammies.
Yeah. And you need to have a material that has extremely high reflectivity, but also has good thermal stability and durability so that they can maintain their performance over long periods of time. Because the other part that we haven't talked about is that it's not like you would align the mirrors precisely and all of a sudden this beam shoots out and sets things on fire. But what would happen is that it would be slowly heating up this one area. And if you could hold it precisely and perfectly long enough, eventually it might get hot enough that you can start charring the wood or catching it on fire. Anybody who's ever like burned like leaves and stuff like that with a magnifying glass knows that like it isn't like you align it right and then instantly things catch fire. It's like a process.
No.
It takes time.
It takes a long time. I was also thinking about this too when you're talking about like, because they're not just reflecting, you know, you talk about death ray, it makes it sound like it's a laser that shoots out of it. It's reflecting heat. But yeah, I always think about this when it comes to like people using mirrors to reflect like Superman's like heat vision or whatever. I'm just like, if Superman just shot like heat vision out of his eyes, I don't know if a mirror would reflect it. I think it would just make the mirror really hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might reflect it a little bit, but then it would.
A little bit.
But the thing is, like the materials that are reflecting it, nothing is a perfect reflector. So it would definitely...
It's going to absorb some stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like even our best solar panels only absorb like, you know, a certain percent of the actual light that comes in and converts it to electricity. The rest just gets converted to heat. So there's the material of that, but then also the other thing that is an issue is that all of these experiments were done under ideal weather conditions. So the other problem is that anything that might stop a perfectly sunny day will greatly decrease the efficiency of the system. So anything like clouds, rain, or even like, you know, different times of day are going to drastically decrease the amount of sunlight that could reach the mirrors and therefore its efficiency, making it an extremely unreliable weapon as well.
If they attacked at night, good luck.
Yeah. The other thing too is that the solar panels, or sorry, like these things would also lose their efficiency as they got hotter. We have this issue with solar panels, and solar panels actually need cooling mechanisms in order to maintain their efficiency, because if these things get too hot, their ability to like absorb energy starts to go down. And there's other things too, like wind, which could cause misalignment, but also dust. If any dust got on the mirrors, it would start to reduce the reflectivity. And so not only would you need like to constantly be cleaning these things, adjusting them, and have perfect weather conditions. And if you did that, if you could hold all of it in the perfect position for long enough, you may be able to create enough energy to start charring some wood. And at that point, you're realizing there's probably some better weapons out there that you could use instead of that.
But then also, big hole in the plan here, Tristan. They're trying to catch ships on fire. There's water everywhere around these ships. That's what they're on. They're gonna be fine.
Well, okay. So old ships are made of wood, and also they're typically, to waterproof them, they use something called pitch, which is basically like tar. So there is like a useful thing to there is like a practical idea to this, because old-timey ships were extremely flammable. And a ship catching fire is definitely a common source of like ships sinking. So this isn't like...
But there's water everywhere. Just get some water.
Well, the thing is that typically on a ship, the water is like, you know, down. Like you have to like if you think about it, you're on a ship, you're probably like a couple decks up, right? So...
Okay, dunk the ship, get back up.
Yeah, just do a barrel roll.
Yeah.
So even if there is a situation where this is theoretically possible, it requires so many perfect conditions for such a small effect that it takes this like death ray beyond all sorts of practicality. It's like the Jericho episode where like if you theoretically could destroy a wall with sound, but the amount of energy that it would take would be so dangerous to the stuff you have that like it just like, even if it's theoretically possible, it's nowhere close to practical. This is maybe even more possible because you can create these conditions with technology of the time, but you're still like relying on absolutely perfect conditions. And even then it doesn't work that great.
That's fair. Were these boats, did these ships that they were shooting, did they have sails, or were they like like the one where you have lots of people rowing?
I imagine they had both.
Because you can shoot the sails, maybe, if they had sails.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, here's the thing. With a beam like that, a much more practical way to do the exact same thing is take a piece of cloth, dip it in something flammable, set that on fire, tie that onto an arrow, set that on fire,
Sure.
shoot arrow at boat.
Shoot arrow at boat.
Flaming
That makes
arrows are a
sense.
much more practical way to do this exact same thing.
And you can have a lot of people doing all those people that you have holding mirrors. You could just have them shooting arrows.
Yeah. So like that's the other part too, that like this is the part, like that's sort of the thing, is like, not only is it's not plausible, but there are like way easier ways to do it that are way more low tech.
Okay.
There's some alternate explanations that people suggest that were things that he did use during the defense, like a steam cannon. There's another archaeologist.
Steam!
Yeah, there's a researcher named Cesar Rossi who believed that Archimedes might have had a steam cannon that would fire projectiles using pressurized steam, potentially using things like Greek fire. Because
that's good.
Yeah, because some people like Leonardo da Vinci wrote about figures like Archimedes making things like this. But again, in the same way, there's no this is like an unverified thing, and there's not really much of a case that there's no more evidence of this than the death ray. Now, there is plenty of in a similar fashion. Here's how you can tell that how impractical this is, because there's another weapon that is also attributed to Archimedes that actually archaeologists would say that it's not impossible that it actually did exist. So this is called the Claw of Archimedes, and it's actually quite clever.
All right, so you teased this at the start, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of this.
Okay, so its name at the time was the Iron Hand, and here's the reason why this is different than the Death Ray. So first of all, it's a defensive invention. The invention is attributed to Archimedes, and we see it written about by historians like Polybius, Livy, and Plutarch, i.e. the contemporary people at the time. And what it is it's sort of like a crane device that has a grappling hook at the end. So what you would do, imagine like I'm trying to think about how to explain it. Like imagine you had like a teeter-totter or something like that, where one side has a bunch of like large spikes coming out of the things. And then when the ship is sailing over top of it, you like push it down, it goes up, and it'll like push the ship out of the water and like pierce
the ship.
Yeah. And it would use leverage to do that. Yeah. It's like this crane-like device that would have a grappling hook, and you would lift and capsize enemy ships. And this you could build in a harbor, and with like a pulley system, have some oxen pull some rope, and it would lift the thing and knock over the ship or stab its bottom and cause it to sink. So
now that's cool.
Yeah. So reportedly, this was used to defend the city during the siege, and so it was written about at the time. There have been several modern experiments that have tested the feasibility of the claw. One example would be actually on a BBC series called Secrets of the Ancients, but also Discovery Channel's Super Weapons of the Ancient World, which is a funny name for something. But both of those,
incredible.
But several experiments have actually demonstrated that this could work. This actually could work. It uses pulleys and leverage and all the kind of technology that would have existed at the time and stuff Archimedes would have known about, and created a practical weapon that could have helped in this very specific situation. And so a mechanism was very plausible and with technology available to Archimedes. Now, there is no physical evidence that the Claw of Archimedes existed, but unfortunately, when you're doing history, you don't always have that kind of a smoking gun. So historians would say, though, that it's very possible.
Give Archimedes a gun.
Give Archimedes a gun, yeah. So while there's no physical evidence, there's enough historical accounts and modern experiments suggest that it was possible. So we can theorize that it might have been an actual thing that was used to defend Syracuse. And as you can see, there's a little image here for you with the funniest looking little guy who's fallen in the water.
I love it so much. Yeah, this image is extremely helpful to sort of understand how it works. So it's like fully submerged in the water. I imagine ships don't even see it. They're sailing over the water like normal. There's this deadly trap under it. And it's got this, like sort of a seesaw teeter-totter thing that oxen are pulling with some, some pulleys and things like that. And it like shoots a claw up into the bottom of a boat this one looks like it's sort of tilting it over so everyone falls out into the water and stuff like that. And that's so cool.
Yeah, because even if you can't pierce the hull, even just causing the ship to capsize would help.
Yeah.
And so like that is a thing that very likely Archimedes was involved with, because we do know that Archimedes is involved with like various interesting bits of engineering. He's the invention of the Archimedes screw, which is sort of a way to use a screw-like mechanism to pump water.
Oh, fun.
And you could probably imagine how that would work. Like you could imagine a screw going into the water that when you turn it, the water kind of comes up the things and comes down.
Oh, yeah.
And so very much...
There's a picture in here. It's helpful.
Yeah. And so I was very much like, who is Archimedes? Because I don't know anything about this guy. I know like Owl and Eureka, and that's it. So I did a little bit of snooping just because I imagine a lot of other people are like, that's a thing I have heard of, but not about, which is my favorite type of thing.
Tell me.
Archimedes was born sometime around the year 287 BCE in Syracuse, New York, or Sicily. One of those two.
One of the two.
Yeah. We're still working that one out. He was the son of an astronomer who was named Phidias, which suggests that he came from a family that had a like history of scientific inquiry. So he grew up maybe like in a kind of sciencey household. He then went to Alexandria, which was a massive port city in Egypt.
Or Louisiana. Still unsure which one. Yeah. I'm
surprised that Alexandria in Louisiana is still called that, because I feel like it would be called like Alexandra.
Yep.
After I heard about Versailles, Kentucky, I was like, no, they can.
Oh no.
or Cairo. I think this is it.
No.
Goodness gracious. All I'm saying is that the Louisiana Purchase was a mistake. America does not deserve anything with a name like those things, because they will just destroy it. But yeah, it also might just be Appalachia, because like I think Cairo is in Kentucky, and like
maybe Alexandria could be pronounced Alexandria.
There's actually a podcast.
Alexandria.
There's a podcast I really like called Oddity Roadshow, where it's an RPG podcast where like they solve like supernatural mysteries all around the American South. And one of the first places that they go is a place called Lebanon. And they always make jokes about how like everyone has different pronunciations, like Lebanon and like things like that.
Incredible.
It's a great podcast. Everyone should listen to it. It's my favorite actual play podcast. It has Shed and Strucci. That's all you need to know. Here you go. You're good.
Oh, excellent. One last thing I'll say about this. There's a fantastic TikTok that Emily showed me about a guy who's like traveling. His job is like, traveling. So he's like, oh, we're going to, I don't know. Let's say like, what's a common city that people mispronounce or whatever? I guess when I was in
New Orleans,
Tennessee, there was New Orleans. Sure. Let's say New Orleans. So like this guy's like, yeah, I'm loving it here in New Orleans. And everyone's like, oh, you have to say Nolans or else people will know you're not from here. And he's like, I'm not from here. And it's like, yeah, but then people will know that you're not from here. And it's like, that's okay. I have nothing to gain by trying to pretend I'm from here.
Yeah, that's fair.
I am not from here.
I got openly mocked by my in-laws for because I'm Canadian, obviously, and I grew up in a place where French is just a language that people speak because it's a country that has French as one of its official languages. So you take your mandatory French education, but then my like in-laws, I was like in my kind of like wife's hometown, and I was like, oh yeah, I went for a walk. I just walked up Joliet Street, and everyone thought that was the funniest thing they had ever heard, because a fool idiot pronouncing Joliet like Joliet, and then said it's Joliet Street. And I'm like, that was when I knew the French should have never sold this land to the Americans, because I mean, there's another one is Terre Haute, Indiana is the name, where it's like that it's Terre Haute, which is the French word for high ground.
Oh yeah. You got to pronounce it like that, or else people will know you're not from here.
Yeah.
That's fine.
It's fine.
That's fine. I'm not from here.
Yeah. I know every time it always throws me up, because I go to America a lot for various reasons, but also I speak French, and there's a lot of places that have French names that are not pronounced like French names. Either way.
All right, back
Archimedes,
on track.
Archimedes. So Archimedes went to Alexandria, where he studied under successors of Euclid, So that was because like Alexandria was like one of like the intellectual centers of the world. Euclid being a very famous mathematician. That's why like the fact that we have an entire form of geometry called Euclidean geometry, for example.
Yes.
Yeah. So math. Archimedes is primarily known for math. He's done a bunch of things like calculating pi with a huge amount of accuracy.
That's awesome.
He developed the method of exhaustion, a precursor to integral calculus for calculating areas and volumes of shapes.
Math makes me exhausted too.
Math is one of those things that I, as a child, hated and felt like I was like, this sucks. I hate it. I don't understand the purpose of it. And then as I'm getting older, I'm learning that I did not appreciate it as much as I wish I had, because I like have like a deeper and deeper appreciation for it the more I learn about it. But I realized that I was taught about it in completely the wrong way. And so
yeah, math is cool. Doesn't mean my brain doesn't get exhausted from trying to do it.
Fair. I feel I have math is one of those things, like math and computer science are like those things that I'm like, in another universe, if I had gotten a proper education on these things when I was a kid, I would have really, really gravitated to it. And there's like,
I was a math whiz kid growing up. And as soon as I graduated, I was like, I will never do math again. And I've forgotten everything. But I was like top of my math class every single year growing up. And I don't remember any of it now.
I had the ADHD really bad as a kid, and math did not go down well with me. And because of the Prussian school system, I was always like, you know, the bottom of the class, and then kind of, you know, you're moved up before you're ready to move up. And then by the time you finish high school, you've done the bare minimum to pass, and you don't understand anything, and you have to learn from scratch.
See, I was the ADHD kid who, I mean, I would do all the math in my head, and then my teachers would get upset that I wouldn't show my work. And I was like, it would be slower to show my work. I don't want to show my work. Here's the answer.
Yeah. And they're like, you can't use a calculator because you're not going to have a calculator in the real world. It's not like everyone would have a calculator in their pocket or something in the future. Anyways, so the big thing that people probably would know about outside of that is the Archimedes principle, which is where you can find the volume of something by taking a thing of water, putting an object inside of it, and then measuring how much water gets displaced by putting it in.
That's the Eureka moment.
Yeah, so this is the story about the Eureka thing. So according to Vitruvius, Archimedes was tasked with determining whether a crown made for King Hiero II was pure gold or if it had been adulterated with silver. So while taking a bath, he noticed that when he got in, the water level rose as he got in, leading him to realize that he could use water displacement to measure the crown's volume and thus its density. Allegedly, he was so excited about this discovery that he ran through the streets of Syracuse naked, shouting, "Eureka!" which is Greek for, "I have found it." The story comes from the Roman architect and engineer Vitruvius. And so here's the part. I mentioned the whole thing about the two things you know about Archimedes is owl and Eureka. The story of the origin of Eureka comes from an architect and engineer from Rome named Vitruvius, who wrote about it in a work called De Architectura, which came out 200 years after Archimedes' death. And that would mean that this is a secondhand account and somewhat unreliable, which is another case of
that's fair.
So very likely but the Eureka story, probably because it was a powerful symbol of the joy of discovery, got attributed to Archimedes, but and it's like a sort of great like example of like as creatives ourselves, the joy of discovery, but also the breakthroughs in the creative process and how good that feels. Like Eureka was used to really fit that, and Archimedes being a just like well-known smart guy at the time.
You can correct me if I'm wrong too, but the whole thing about, you know, he was taking a bath. He got so excited about this idea of water displacement that he ran through the street naked shouting Eureka. I feel like when I heard that story growing up, I was like, why would he leave his home naked and start running through the streets shouting Eureka? But his baths were like a public thing. He went to a public bath and he was right. Isn't that, I believe that's what it was. It's not like he was in his own private bath in his house and then got so excited he ran out in the streets naked shouting. I think he was just like so excited. He was like, okay, I'm going to go from the public bath, you know, that I was in. I'm not even gonna put my clothes on. I'm just gonna run through the streets because I'm so excited. I want to go back and discover that. But again, obviously, this story is dubious at best. But I just wanted to throw that in because I always imagined he got. I've never been so excited about something in my life. I have lots of shower thoughts, and I get a lot of ideas in the shower for videos and stuff. I've never been so excited about one that I've left my private home shower to my neighborhood naked, shouting like, I have this really cool idea for a video.
I will say that that rarely ever happens to me. You get arrested one time and
Rarely.
It gets it out of your system pretty fast. Indecent exposure is hard to live down.
That's fair.
But yeah, the thing is also nudity wasn't as big a deal back then either.
That's true.
But people are skeptical that it was literally true because it fits too neatly into the trope of a lone genius having a sudden dramatic insight that was a combative narrative device, but not really reflective on how the scientific discovery process ever actually works. But it's a powerful one. But again, shows that like even the things that aren't ancient aliens, probably don't know. But he did invent a bunch of cool things too. For example, the Archimedes screw.
Yeah, you talked about that screw.
Yeah, and here's a picture of it for you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is like a screw. It's like a hollow screw. So like a tube wrapped around like this metal pole, I imagine. And I guess as you turn it, the bottom half is submerged the bottom portion is submerged in water. And the hollow screw, as you turn it, that hole fills up with water, and it sort of just like climbs up to the top of the hole. That's kind of cool.
And there's a lot of modern irrigation and fluid transfer systems that still use this today. The Claw of Archimedes, again, is an example of it.
The coolest thing I've never heard of until today.
Mm-hmm.
That is so cool.
And yeah, just like various, because the other thing is too that to protect Syracuse from invaders, he also designed a bunch of other war machines, including things that make more sense if you're a mathematician, like catapults and things that have a less dramatic nature. But, things that if you had a precise idea of like angles and pre-calculus and stuff like that, you could figure out like, hey, if we launch
velocity and all these cool things.
Yeah. And so the thing is that Archimedes' work is actually like part of the foundation for a lot of modern scientific and engineering principles. And his methods would then influence subsequent generations of scientists, including people like Newton, Kepler, and Galileo.
Yeah.
And then again, he was involved. The war we're talking about here is the Punic Wars, which were a series of 3 wars fought between Rome and Carthage, and was a significant point for Rome's expansion and eventually the destruction of Carthage. The Second Punic War was the war that was happening during the Siege of Syracuse, where Rome fought to conquer strategic locations in the Mediterranean. Syracuse, which was led by King Hiero II, was originally allied with Rome, but later sided with Carthage, and then was sieged by Roman general Marcus Claudius Marcellus. Archimedes' defensive inventions did play an important role in prolonging the defense against Roman forces, but despite Archimedes' efforts, Syracuse was eventually captured and Archimedes was killed by a Roman soldier.
His brain was too powerful.
Yeah. So the other thing too is like the idea is like, like a death ray was not a thing that he could have possibly have thought up. Like that is definitely like advanced technology for its day, and aliens definitely would have had to give him that
this idea that aliens had to give him that idea.
Yeah.
And then potentially it didn't even work. I don't know.
Here's the thing though. So the death ray was based on the principle of concentrating sunlight using mirrors, parabolic mirrors that focus sunlight on a single point.
Yeah.
Here's the thing though. That is a technology does exist and did exist at the time. A more common version is something called a burning glass. So these are magnifying glasses that are used to focus sunlight, usually for starting fires. And it has existed since ancient times. And I put in here a picture of one of them that belonged from the 1770s that was used for the same purpose. But it's called a burning glass and is a very old technology that if Archimedes did make the death ray and made it work, the principles of focusing sunlight using glass and mirrors and such like that is well established as a thing that people knew about.
Super old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks really cool. To the point where a child today can figure it out with a magnifying glass, and they often do.
I mean, they had to use the glasses in in what's that book? Why can't I think of the book? The very classic book about little boys trapped on an island.
Lord of the Flies?
Lord of the Flies. They had to use the glasses to build fires.
Oh.
Because that's, and it was and if you listen to my English teacher, that was a symbol of their civilization and their humanity. And as soon as those glasses were broken and they couldn't build fires anymore, then they devolved into chaos.
You know that there was a story of a real situation that was actually fairly close to Lord of the Flies that happened. It happened in the Pacific Ocean. No. Because you know how Lord of the
Gilligan's Island?
Yeah, it's Gilligan's Island.
It was Gilligan's Island.
Radios
it's the R-rated Gilligan's Island where they all started to fight and kill and eat each other.
No, it was a group of boys who stole a boat and then it got lost and they capsized and they landed on an island. But here's the thing about it. So Lord of the Flies' whole theme is that humans, if they lose the veneer of civilization, will turn feral and go against each other. When these kids were discovered a few years in, they had actually developed a decently running civilization that was fairly egalitarian and they worked together really well. And even one of the boys had broken a limb during that time and they had set it and he was being taken care of. And it showed that
that's awesome.
There's a lot more evidence that in those kinds of situations, we actually get along and do better to each other. Than
So let's all be trapped on an island.
Well, we are kind of trapped on an island.
Well, we all already are. We're already all trapped on an island called Earth.
Yep,
called Spaceship Earth.
But it just shows that our idea that humans are all evil is of a questionable nature. The other thing too, though, about this whole thing is that this idea of concentrating solar power is being used in modern technology. And I wanted to talk about this whole thing called concentrated solar power, which I didn't know about until relatively recently. So it's a different way of doing solar power than we have the photovoltaics, the sort of stuff you put on your roof or anything like that. In some places where the weather is fairly regularly sunny, there's not a lot of cloud coverage, it doesn't rain a whole lot. There's a way of doing solar power where you make a huge circle of mirrors.
Yeah.
And all of them are computer controlled to reflect the sunlight all to the top of this tower that's at the center. And they reflect so much sunlight that it gets so hot that you can use that to generate electricity.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, there's one.
And does it generate more electricity than the regular old solar panels that we all know about?
I think it's slightly more efficient than photovoltaics because you're using the heat directly to power. Because every electricity system is just heating water so that you can turn a turbine that turns magnets that creates electricity. Almost every form of electricity is just doing that. Nuclear power is using heat from nuclear fission to boil water to turn a turbine that turns magnets that makes electricity.
It all comes back to steam.
Yeah. You're not wrong. But I thought that it was really cool. There's one of these is located in the Mojave Desert in California and uses thousands of these things to generate electricity. And there's another one in Spain. And I believe, and they use things, this is really cool. The one in Spain uses molten salt. So it uses this substance that is really good at absorbing lots and lots and lots of heat. And then when the heat source is taken away, it cools down very slowly. And so what you can do is you can heat it up all day and power stuff, but even at night when the sun goes away, the liquid salt, the molten salt's still going to be hot throughout the night and can still power things. There's a whole generation of nuclear power plants that are in production or they're in development and production where you take this liquid salt and you put fissile material like thorium into it. And when you heat it up, it causes nuclear fusion and it can sort of self-propel itself with its own power. Ooh. And you could power it for decades on its own chain reaction. And because it's already liquid, all you need to do is unlike with traditional nuclear power, when the rods melt, that's a meltdown and that causes a huge problem. This, if it overheats, all you need to do is have this area that's connected to electricity, a tube with a little puck of something that's kept super, super cold with electricity. And if the electricity gets cut out, all you have to do is cut the power to it. That cold thing melts, and all the liquid salt just drains into like an underground tub where it's like kept safe from it. So like it can't melt down. Like you can't, it's like the safest form of nuclear power you can imagine. And it's so low maintenance that you could actually like build one of these reactors, bury it underground, and you wouldn't have to go back for like decades to refuel it. It's the coolest thing ever. That's
awesome.
Yeah. But the whole thing is that like the concentrated solar power technology is basically the Archimedes death ray being used to address climate change. Yeah.
This is the Archimedes death ray, only it's not a death ray anymore. It's a life ray.
Yeah.
It's a life ray that will save the planet Earth, maybe.
Now for the part where I make you sad, I actually realized okay, this is the thing though. I argue that on the grand scheme of things we talk about on this show, getting this wrong is not like, this is a pretty light episode, and I'm not going to take it away by saying that like Archimedes was secretly a Nazi or something.
Okay,
but
that's fine. Here, I'll do this. I'll do a sad. I'll do the sad song, which I have on here somewhere, but I'll only play like 1 second of it.
We need like a version of that.
That's about as sad as it.
We need a version of the exact same notes, but it's all in a major chord. So it's like that.
That'd be pretty good.
In the grand scheme of things, it's a pretty mild one to be wrong about, but I think that what's really useful to take away from this story, and I think that what's almost more interesting to take away is not the death ray, but the Eureka thing, which is that I think one of the first red flags that we should have for a lot of things is when we find a story that's what I wrote too cute by half. One of the, like, anytime you're reading a book, like there's a lot of like, I've been listening to a lot of a podcast called If Books Could Kill, which is another amazing podcast I really like. And there's so many stories in that are like, just so that perfectly show the example of what the person's talking about. And they're just like this cute little thing that perfectly encapsulates an idea. And anytime you hear a story like that, like the Eureka moment, like the death ray, that's a red flag. And you should be questioning it, because our history, I think that humans are very gravitated towards understanding things and the concept of stories.
Yeah.
So it's very easy for us to remember these things, but then they usually end up being wrong or at least grossly misrepresentative of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
yeah, we're storytellers. We like a good, clean narrative, but that rarely ever happens in real life.
Yeah. So anytime you hear a Eureka-like story, kind of, maybe,
including on the show Eureka, where they had one of those stories every episode that would tie together pretty nicely.
Man, I really like that show, and I'm going to introduce Kelly to it in the near future, and I'm really excited. I think she's going to really like it.
But hey, just remember,
not real.
It didn't happen that way in real life.
Yeah.
Eureka, the TV show Eureka, I bet it's mostly fictional.
God. I think there is a real Eureka somewhere, but I don't remember what its deal is. I think it's somewhere in the West, somewhere in the American West. Anyways, one place where there's not a lot of just so stories is if you go to @probs.aliens on Twitter.
Yeah. Are we not doing Blue Sky anymore?
I mean, I'll do Blue Sky when the critical mass has happened, but I gotta say, I think they held off on the invite only for too long, and they kind of
that's okay. Just look for Probs Not Aliens anywhere.
To quote Lin-Manuel Miranda, they threw away their shot.
You can also follow us at different things. We do other things outside of this podcast. Tristan, for example, has a YouTube channel called Step Back. What do you do over there?
Well, I try to talk about the past and the present and why it's important to understand things through history so that you can make sense of the world as it is today. I'm currently working on a video about private equity firms and the sort of phase change that the economy is going through. But Scott, if I wanted to know why superheroes had white eyes, where would I go for that?
Ooh, that's a fun one. It relates to old, ancient Greek statues and things like that. So it kind of fits in with like an Archimedes sort of thing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you can go follow my YouTube channel, NerdSync, NERDSYNC, all one word. And I make videos about comics and superheroes and cartoons and a lot of Scooby-Doo related stuff. I'm trying to just do a lot of fun cartoon history and analysis and whatnot over there. And that's what I do. And you can follow this show and support the show over at nebula.tv/probablynotaliens. You get episodes early over there, as well as on Patreon. We have a Patreon, and any support would mean a lot to us. That Patreon is patreon.com/probsnotaliens. Cool rewards over there. And again, it just helps support the show so we can continue doing this. It's very fun. We like doing it. If you don't have any money, no worries. You can always leave a review of this podcast on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. That really helps. If you've already done that, then tell your friends about it. Mm-hmm. Tell your friends. Run through the streets naked, shouting about this podcast.
There you go. There, we brought it full circle.
We legally don't do that.
Yeah.
But it would be funny. But don't do it. And a very great place, a great website to shout out while you're not doing that is probsnotaliens.com. It's got links to everywhere where you can listen to the show.
Run through the streets shouting it out fully clothed.
Fully clothed. How about that? Fully clothed. Go throughout your neighborhood shouting probsnotaliens.com. That'd be great. But that is it. So until next time, my name is Scott Nicewander.
I'm Tristan Johnson. The truth is out there. Probably. That's me doing like a Samus gun or.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like you were mirroring.
It's like building it up to like the beam.
Building it up. Big death ray beam.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's like the Death Star. Death Star is Archimedes' death ray.
Yeah, Death Star is mirrors.
Death Star is mirrors.